Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker, formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. When his health failed, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. He then became embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of the Lamadiza organized crime family, known as Leo. Convinced by his longtime friend Frankie to flee from his commitments to the Lamadiza family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depended on the kindness of strangers. One stranger, a burqa-wearing doctor known as Fatima, took pity on Isaac and helped him make his way to the mysterious Star X line. At the end of all hope, they found the Star X line and the slim promise that the enigmatic beings behind the Star X could save Isaac from the implants which destroyed his life. What do you do when those who saved you have recorded everything you are? What do you do when your every action is tracked by the Keylogger? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Keylogger, the third installment in the Firmware Pentology by Colbytrax. (00-00-10) When did you first realize that things were not what they seemed? Fatima asked, his voice pitched to a husky falsetto. I stared at the cup in my hands. A ceramic mug, white on the inside, olive green on the outside. A line halfway up its inner surface marked the high water mark of the thick green tea contained within. I watched as a bit of loose tea drifted lazily around the cup. It swirled with its brethren in the Brownian motion caused by Fatima's pouring of the tea but a few minutes before. I watched the strands of tea as they spun in the tiny whirlpool in a mug. I shook my head. The loose tea continued to circulate within the cup. I watched with the intensity of a subway rat after a bit of pretzel. 1001, 1002, I whispered. 1001, 1002, I repeated. 1001, 1002, I iterated for a third time. What was that, Ishmael? Fatima asked. I heard the shift of his burqa as he loosened the screen before his face. 1001, 1002, I continued. I kept my eyes on the cup, tracking the spiral path of a single strand of tea. 1001, 1002. Ishmael, what are you doing? Fatima asked, his voice sounding sharper than usual. I snapped from my study of the cup and the tea and the strange dance within and looked at Fatima. His burqa smoothed his features, making him appear as more of a suggestion of a person. How dehumanizing clothes could be. He held his mug before him, as if he had stopped in the middle of moving it to his lips. His burqa screen hung loose, hiding his face, but allowing him access to his mouth. Fatima extended a hand to me and placed it on my shoulder. His manly surgeon's hands felt comforting through the thin gloves he wore. What is it, Ishmael? When did he start calling me Ishmael? The first time I had heard him say that name had been in that cell of a room at the core of the Amazov catfish farm. It sounded strange to hear him say it so many times. What did it feel like? It felt as if he were trying to cement a connection to me through repetition. Call me Isaac, I said as I returned my gaze to my cup. 1001, 1002. Without comment, Fatima asked a fourth time. Isaac, what are you counting? First use of Isaac, I noted. 1001, 1002. There it is again. There what is again? Fatima asked. The tea in my cup. The bits of leaf are spinning, orbiting, doing whatever the right word is without slowing down. They should be slowing down. I watched the bits of tea continue to spin. 1001, 1002. Yep, same speed. Definitely not behaving normally. I felt the world shift in my head. Something small moved within my skull, and the world spun out of alignment for a moment before righting itself. I locked my eyes on the cup and counted the rotations. 1001, 1002, I watched as my shift counted from 1001, 1002, to 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. During the long minute in which it took for the bits of tea to slow to half their speed, Fatima sat motionless. It was so quiet in the room that I could hear the shifting of the fibers in Fatima's burqa. I raised my head and looked about the room. There should have been the noise of fans, distant pumps, the popping and grinding of a structure adjusting to the demands that heat, light, pressure, and gravity placed upon it. Even in the empty spaces of the greatest office building where the switches and routers which made modern life possible were hidden out of sight, there was always a wall of white noise. Here, in this room, there was no white noise. I felt a touch of dizziness. The world shifted again. Then I heard the white noises of life. The thunder of blood in the ears. The slow, rhythmic hiss of my first breath followed by the breath of Fatima. The sound of distant compressors, hidden pumps, and the ever-present hum of fans all came to me. It felt as if someone had forgotten to add an element to the world, and then upon remembering it, poured their total attention to getting every detail correct. Fatima stared at me, his cup still suspended between the table and his mouth. He must have caught my eye watching his rock-steady cup as it hung in the air, suspended by the unmoving bulk of his arm, for his cup suddenly started to move toward the screen which hid his face. I watched as he carefully shifted the screen, allowing the cup to pass, and took a long sip. Something gave me the impression that if I did not watch him drink, the cup would simply re-emerge from beneath the screen, its level depleted, but without the associated sounds or motions of drinking. I watched as he sipped at the cup. I swear I heard a breath and a swallow at the same time. I shook my head. Fatima had been talking to me. What did he want to know? I cleared my throat and spoke slowly and distinctly. What was it you had asked me? When? Fatima asked as he placed the cup back onto the table between us. As the cup clinked on the ceramic of the covering, I realized that I had not been aware of there being a table before I heard the clink. What was going on here? Was the brain damage worse than I thought? Was I in an operating theater somewhere hallucinating my final moments away? Before, I said, before I started counting. The counting? Which time? Fatima asked. It had only been a moment or two before. Why was he being so evasive? I pictured the cup. How the brown tea had formed a line against the olive-colored interior of the mug with the white exterior. How the light plastic made everything feel too light. No. The tea was green, I whimpered. What was happening here? What was that, Ishmael? Fatima asked. Why was he calling that? Why was he calling me Ishmael? Hadn't I just told him I was Isaac? The tea was green. The cup was olive outside, white inside, and it was ceramic. I cried. Fatima tapped his cup. The cup rang a thin, staccato note as his fingernails tapped it. I stared at the cup. Fatima wore gloves. How can it make that noise when you are wearing gloves? I recoiled. I wanted to move away from the table. I wanted to stand up, knock my chair, my stool. What the hell was I sitting on? I looked down, and behind me, I was in a high-backed kitchen chair. It was the same kind seen in classic homes and movies about life on a prairie farm. It was something fashionable in Nebraska or Dakotas, not something seen in the city. Besides, I think it was wood, real wood, not some strange concoction mixed up in a maker. But if it had been there all along, why couldn't I remember the pressure of its surfaces against my body? I lifted my eyes again. The cup before me was as it was in the beginning, olive on the outside, white on the inside, green tea swirled within, the weight of the ceramic heavy in my hands. Fatima held a teapot in his hand. "Would you like a cup of tea?" he asked, his voice a soft falsetto. "But I haven't drunk what I have," I said, looking down at the cup in my hand. "But Ishmael, your cup is empty," Fatima answered. I raised my head and watched him reach across the softly reflective stainless steel tabletop which sat between us, teapot in hand. I almost growled, "My name is Isaac!" But then I looked down. What he said was correct, I realized. The cup was dry within. Whatever I had seen before could only be a fever dream of a dying brain. "Am I dying?" I asked as Fatima filled my cup with the fragrant green liquid. I felt it smelt good. I just couldn't tell what flavors it was made of. Such a strange thing. A wonderful smell which lacked any frame of reference. "And why would you ask such a question?" Fatima asked. "The world has been behaving strangely," I answered matter-of-factly. "When did you first realize that things were not what they seemed?" Fatima asked, his voice pitched to a husky falsetto. I stared at the cup in my hands. A ceramic mug, white on the inside, olive green on the outside. A line halfway up its inner surface marked the high water mark of the thick green tea contained within. Firmware Keylogger is the third book in the firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins where Firmware Proxy ends, which in turn followed on the heels of Firmware Hijacked. So you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked or Proxy, this would be a great time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 46 in your choice of either EPUB or Mobi. Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and Keylogger are all available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, and smashwords.com. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and soon Keylogger is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the bottom will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Keylogger is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike license. Do what you want with it. Just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. I do mostly Twitter, so if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Thank you once again. Remember to be fabulous and have a wonderful week.